Welcome to our fourth game in our Battle of Victoria campaign series. So far the French have succeeded in delaying the British assaults in the first two scenarios, but the British had success in the third game, which hopefully you saw last weekend. This is the fourth in the series, and it's the battle for the Zadorra villages. Okay, so in this part of the battle, General Graham with the 1st and 5th Division has to attack the French over the river Zadorra. And in this scenario that means capturing the three villages we've got in this table, and opposing him is General Rye. Now a couple of viewers have asked me if I could give them a clearer order of battle for the game, so we'll do that before we get started. Okay, so let's start with the French. French have three brigades. The first brigade you can hear is on their far left flank. This is a brigade of 4 battalions of regular line infantry. Two of these are reservists. Then we move across the table. We have a further 5 battalions here in the central village. These are all, again, line infantry and are all reservist battalions. Then as we move across to the far left flank, we have a final French brigade of 4 battalions, and we have 2 of light and 2 of line. The line battalions, I think, are the ones at the rear. I do need to check, but I think those 2 ones at the rear are both the line battalions with the predominance of dark blue trousers, and the front 2 battalions are regulars. The regulars are line infantry, and the light battalions here are grenadiers. The French also have 2 artillery batteries on this hill, and the formations holding these villages have a battalion gun attached to them, which we will be giving them some extra firepower as a result. And again, you can see in this brigade we've got a battalion gun as well. And then the final French force, which is in reserve at the moment, is a brigade of chasseurs à cheval. In the scenario, in the General d'Armée book, there is a 5th brigade on the table, a brigade of Spanish infantry, but I don't have any brown uniformed Spanish to represent Joseph's battalion, part of Joseph's Spanish division that was fighting in this battle. So I've removed those, and I've removed a brigade of Spanish troops that were fighting for Wellington. Both are broadly 4 or 5 battalions strong and reservists, so very similar level troops, so shouldn't alter the balance of the battle too much. Okay, so there's the French dispositions. We start on the far left flank of the French, with them putting pressure on the village of Zadorra. We then have the French in the centre, another brigade of 5 battalions, are putting pressure on the village of Gamara. And then, actually I think I've got my village names the wrong way around. This is actually Zadorra on the French far left. A brigade in there. A brigade in the centre in Gamara. And then a brigade here on the far left of the French position, which is Abshuko. And this brigade is not occupied by anybody at the moment. We've just got some Portuguese skirmishers in there, actually. All right, so that's the French deployment. I'll now move on to the Allies. Okay, for the Allies, and don't worry, this sunshine coming through the window will disappear quite quickly as the sun goes round, so we won't have that impacting the later shots of the game. So we have Spry here with his Portuguese brigade. 2 of these are regular, and there will be 4 battalions on table in due course. The 4th battalion is currently off table. These are 2 battalions of line and 2 battalions of reservists. Then as we move along, we've got a KGL brigade, 2 battalions of regular KGL, and 2 battalions of KGL light. They're commanded by Halkett, and the troops there are all veterans. We then have Robinson with another British brigade. These are all veterans as well. And then finally, we have this brigade under Hay, and these are just line troops. So So better quality troops for the British. We've got 7 battalions of veterans here, no battalions of veterans for the French, but they are in a good, strong defensive position. The victory conditions for this game require the British to capture 2 of the 3 villages and cross the river. There are some special rules for crossing the river that you can see running down the centre of this table. The river is a very steep-sided stream. I would have tried to get my larger river pieces out when I was setting the table up last night, but it was pouring with rain here, so they stayed in the shed. So I'm afraid we only have a slightly small stream running down the middle of the table. So the movement rules are skirmishers can cross the stream, but they run the risk of taking 1d3 casualties. Regular line infantry, line cavalry and artillery can only cross the stream in the villages, at the bridges, and formed lined infantry, if forced back to retreat across the stream, takes an extra 1d3 casualties when they do that. To attack in the villages, you effectively attack them just as built-up areas, and if you succeed in capturing the built-up area, you can move across the stream and occupy the buildings on both sides of the stream, as you can see here. So there we go. Hopefully this will be an enjoyable game. Welcome back to the battle to capture the villages over the river Zadorra. All right, now ready to get started with the game proper. We've done a couple of turns worth of long-range artillery fire as the British brigades moved up into effective combat range, and we'll just do a quick overview. So we have there the left-hand British brigade of all regular line troops facing off against a strong French brigade of 2 lights and 2 line. Then we move across. We have got a veteran British brigade able to deploy to the right or to the left to attack either of the villages. The British putting pressure on. Opposite them, we've got the French artillery battery and their strongest brigade, but these are all reservists occupying this village in the centre. Then we have the KGL facing off against the village in the centre. And then finally on the right, we have the French chasseurs ready for a potential flanking attack once they're released on turn 3, which is actually this turn. And here we have the final French brigade moving up against this village, but also being pressed by the Portuguese. So we'll see who gets into there first, probably dependent on the initiative rolls this turn. Okay, we'll start by allocating ADCs and seeing who's got initiative. Okay, so the French did quite well with their ADC allocations. They needed a 3 or more to activate their ADCs. They activated all 4 and got a double 6. So that got them 5 ADCs, but then I got a bit greedy. So I allocated 3 of them to put the Grand Battery on the hill, or the Brigaded Artillery on the hill, onto assault artillery fire, which would make them the optimum efficiency. And then I allocated an ADC as a reroll for this brigade, trying to get into this village, and for my cavalry reserve to bring it out of reserve. But I didn't give them a reroll for that. So unfortunately, the French cavalry is still in reserve, and this brigade in the centre also went hesitant. For the Allies, they only got 3 ADCs, and all brigades went active apart from their far left-hand flank, which is hesitant. So we have 2 hesitant French brigades and 1 hesitant Allied brigade. This is an important role as we try and contest this first uncontested village. Looks good for the Allies. They get to move first, so they will get a chance to occupy this objective. All right, let's start with charges, if any, then movement on turn 3, this will be. Okay, so after movement starting on the right here, the Portuguese have occupied this first village. They go unformed as they move into the village, but they are now occupying that village. The French have moved up so they can potentially countercharge in next turn, and the French skirmisher screen has moved off to the left flank. In the centre, no major movement. The KGL have moved forward. All firing against the village will count as inferior volleys, as will all firing across the stream, because the amount of vegetation built up on the stream's edge is providing both cover and reducing the effect of offensive volleys against them. And all artillery fire will count at long range for units that are sheltering behind the screen. So these British on this hill will still be vulnerable, but those front units, now they're starting to move off the crest of the hill and up to the line of the stream, will be sheltered by it. All right, that's it for movement this turn. We'll now do some skirmisher fire and then be back with the French batteries opening up against the Allies. So starting down here first, we get 3 dice for a 4-man skirmisher screen. That goes down to 1 dice for firing at a built-up area, because there's a -2 for firing at garrisons, but +1 because we have the 60th Rifles in support here. So we cause a further casualty against the French garrison here. That'll take them up to 4 casualties, so the British skirmisher fire is proving particularly effective here. The British skirmisher screen that's moved up will open fire against that French infantry battalion. Again, this will be 3 dice, normally +1 for being having the 60th Rifles attached, but -1 because the French are in cover. This time we cause no casualties. And moving across here, we have another British skirmisher screen, opening fire against the French skirmishers there. Again, this will be 3 dice for the British. They cause 1 casualty against the French. I'll mark that up in a second. And then finally, I should have moved the Portuguese skirmishers out of the village. They are just the other side of the stream. We'll just pop them down here. They will open fire against, we'll pop them behind those olive groves. Those vines, they just look slightly better like that, I think. All right, so they will now open fire. They will only get 2 dice firing against the French skirmishers. And again, they cause no casualties. All right, well now let's do the French firing. So we'll fire this French skirmish screen. Again, they will only get 2 dice firing at the Portuguese. They don't do anything. This French skirmisher screen, it's 5 bases strong, so it will be 3 dice firing at the British. That's quite good. They cause 2 casualties against the British. We'll put the casualty markers on in a second. Then we have the French garrison here. Will open up against this battalion of KGL. That'll be 3 dice for them. They cause no casualties. Nothing for all these battalions up here as they're out of range. And then we've got the French again opening fire here. They'll fire against this unit. I think that's in 5 centimetre, 9-inch range. They get 3 dice normally for firing a garrison. Because they've got the attached battalion gun, they get a bonus dice. So there'll be 4 dice. So I'll re-roll one of these. They don't cause any casualties for the first 3. And then with the 4th dice they do. They cause 1 casualty with their attached artillery piece. We also, now I'm thinking about it, did not use the attached artillery piece over here. So we'll fire that in garrison as well. That does roll a 3, does no casualties. All right, there's a few casualties to mark up. That's the end of firing, and that is the end of turn 3. Okay, so we've just opened fire. Sorry, I've neglected to fire my French artillery batteries. So we've just opened fire with the French on the hill. So they've rolled a 6, which at long range is half a casualty on the Allies, but 2 more from the fire dice. So let's see if that 50% chance converts. No, it doesn't. So that's 2 casualties so far on this British battalion. Okay, and then we'll fire with the 2nd artillery battery on the hill. This is the 12-pounders. Okay, they roll an 8 and they get 2 extra casualties again as well, so that's quite good. So 8 is only 1 casualty, so that's 3 more casualties. So that is 5 casualties against that British battalion. So even though no discipline tests, that is really very effective firing by the French artillery. Okay, we'll mark those 5 casualties up, and then we really will move on to the next turn, turn 4. Okay, so let's roll the ADCs live. Both sides get 4 dice. So they both have 4 brigades, and the British have got 4 active ADCs. The French have got only 3. I think the French, I don't feel I'm desperate for my cavalry reserve at the moment. Nothing has got over the bridge. We're still holding our defensive line, so I think I'm going to go for artillery assault again with my 3 French ADCs. Over on the right-hand side, I think we're okay. I think we're just going to move our British battalions forward, so we'll go for re-rolls with all the British battalions. Let's roll for their activation first. Starting with the Portuguese, well, they're active, as is the brigade next to them, and then this brigade here in the centre, we get a 6, and then on the far left, we are hesitant, but we get our re-roll. We are active. Okay, so all British brigades are active, which means the British have got at least a reasonable chance of getting the initiative this turn. Okay, we'll just flip this commander around. I tend to put my commanders facing backwards if the brigades are hesitant, just so I remember. All right, now for the French. Let's roll for their large brigade in the... let's roll for their artillery first. So this is the only one with a reroll. So the artillery is active again for the French, and they have artillery assault going off. Okay, let's do the other brigades from left to right. Left brigade is active. Central brigade is hesitant again. Cavalry brigade is active, and my right-hand brigade, which we might want to do an attack with, is also active. So the French have got artillery assault off, but have one hesitant brigade. So this will be initiative at -1 for the French. The French roll a 6, the Allies only roll a 3. So the French do have initiative in turn 4. Okay, so the only charge so far has been the French. They did decide to charge the village. They don't have infantry assault off, so they haven't got any supports. But the Portuguese are unformed in the village at the moment, so they decided they would have a go. So that's the first assault of the game going off. Otherwise, no other charges, and the French will do normal movement. Okay, so the Allies have moved all of their battalions forward here on this brigade. 2 front battalions moving to put pressure onto the village, and their skirmish screen also be able to fire from the left. For our central brigade, this final battalion is still going to be exposed to artillery fire from the hill, but the other battalion has moved up against the river line and also to put pressure on this village on the left. So we look across to the centre. The KGL have moved forward to open fire on this brigade, and the Portuguese will be remaining where they are to try and hold this village on the right. All right, now let's see whether the French do any movement, and then we'll move on to Allied firing. Okay, so French have also completed their movement. They deployed a battalion into line and moved another battalion up into closer support of the village. So the village will open fire first. It will get 3 shots plus 1 for its attached artillery battery. So 4 shots, and we'll go against this green battalion that's putting pressure on us. We cause 1 casualty on the British there. All right, we'll do an inferior volley for this French battalion, firing across the stream at the yellow flagged 28th Gloucesters, I think it is. We roll a 7. All right, a 7 inferior volley is 1 casualty against the 28 Gloucesters. Right, mark that up. All right, then the French will fire their next garrison. These will fire at the KGL that's moving up beside them. Again, there is an attached artillery battery in this village. That'll be 4 dice. They roll 1 casualty on the French. We'll mark that up in a second. That's their battery fired. Then this French skirmisher screen will open up. So we've got 4 dice normally for 5 bases, 3s because we're firing at skirmishers. 1 more casualty against the Allies from that French skirmisher screen, and then from the French skirmisher screen here against the KGL, against the Portuguese, we cause no casualties. So that's the French skirmishers fired. Now we'll fire the French artillery batteries again on the hill. Artillery assault. They will go against this battalion. So these are again at long range. We roll a 7 at long range. I think is just half a casualty. And we got no bonus dice. So that's half a casualty so far. And then for the second gun, well, that causes 2 bonus casualties. And a 7 is another half. So let's roll those 2 halves, see if they convert. They don't. But we did get the 2 extra fire dice casualties, so that'll be 2 casualties on that British battalion. I think that's it for French firing this turn. I'll mark those up and we'll do the British return fire. Okay, so potentially the most devastating fire from the British on this far left flank. So we'll start with the British skirmisher screen over here, normally 4 dice, but down to 2 because we're firing into built up area. They don't do anything. Then we've got 3 inferior volleys. Because all these battalions moved, these 3 British battalions moved, and in the scenario rules, all firing into the villages is inferior. So the first one does 3, that'll be nothing, that'll be a loss of fire discipline. Second one does 7, which is 1 casualty on the garrison, and the third one does nothing, losing fire discipline. So not great, although the casualties are racking up. That's 5 casualties now on the garrison there. Okay, and then we'll do an inferior volley across the stream here against the French that are opposing us. That's a bit more like it. That's 9. That's 2 casualties and a discipline test. Let's do the discipline test on the French. They pass, but they have taken 2 casualties. Okay, I just need another dice. Hang on a second. All right, then down here, these KGL lights. I don't think anything's in their firing arc, and these 2nd Battalion is still currently screened by their colleagues to the front, so we can fire an inferior volley from the regular KGL. We do a 7, that's 1 casualty on the garrison in the village here. Mark those up with a casualty dice in a second. Then we've got our skirmish screen here, so that's normally 3 dice for a 4-man screen, 4 dice, but down to 3 because we're targeting skirmishers. 1 more casualty on the French skirmish screen. They will lose a base. Portuguese skirmishers will fire across the river at the French. They do 1 casualty on the French. And then the Portuguese have got to do a defensive volley as the Allies come charging in. I think they may, because they're unformed, I don't know whether they lose a dice. I'll roll 2 and then I'll roll 1, and I'll just check the rules, see if the 3rd one counts. So I rolled 2 5s, that's 1 casualty. The 3rd one would do nothing anyway, so just 2 casualties against that attacking French column. And there's no charge results for going into a built-up area. We go straight into melee, so we will move on to that melee after we've completed all the firing. Okay, so this could be a close one, a good chance for the French to get back in. So the Portuguese lose a dice for being unformed, the French lose a dice for attacking a built-up area. Let's see how we do. Okay, Portuguese do well. They roll 3 casualties, and the French only cause 2. And on a infantry against the built-up area, if the casualty difference is 1, you can choose to fight on. The defender gets to choose first. Well, the Portuguese are definitely going to carry on the fight. I think the French might as well too, as it's relatively close. Okay, so we now go on to the 2nd round of combat, and the French have now taken 5 casualties, so they lose a dice, but they no longer lose the dice for attacking the built-up area because they're already assumed to be fighting their way over the walls. The Portuguese lose a dice still for being unformed. So it's still 4 dice each. Let's see how we see the combat goes this time. My gosh, it looks like the French have got in. They've caused 4 casualties against the Portuguese for only 1 in return. They will be pushed back, and that will be a retreat result, I'm sure. Okay, we've rolled for activation, and the French are did reasonably well. Their left-hand brigade here, seizing this village, is active, and they have managed to activate their reserve. They used their reroll to do that. They only had 2 ADCs, so then they had to go on raw dice rolls for the rest. So unfortunately this brigade in the centre went hesitant, and the brigade on the left is active, and we do need to roll for their artillery batteries. They go hesitant, so anything at long range they will not be able to target. We have 2 hesitant French brigades, although I'm not sure the artillery brigade counts as an activated brigade because it doesn't get an ADC, but you can activate it as a brigade. Okay, we'll count that as 2 active brigades, 2 hesitant brigades rather. I hope that wittering made some sense. Over here for the Allies, we've gone for infantry assault on the brigade on the left with a reroll, which we get, and then in the centre, this brigade here unfortunately has gone hesitant, so it won't be able to support the assault. The KGL are active, but may or may not choose to assault this turn, and the Portuguese after that rebuff have also gone hesitant. So in the initiative roll-off, both sides have 2 hesitant units, and the French do not succeed this time. The Allies get a 7, the French get a 3. Both are on -2, so the Allies get initiative in this turn. Okay, so charging and movements completed for turn 6, I think we're on. So the 3 British battalions here have all gone in following the declaration of infantry assault. So the leading battalion's gone in, and the other 2 will get to fight in the 2nd round if the combat is a draw. In the centre here, this battalion remains where it was, but the French skirmisher screen has moved up to the hedge line to contest it with the Allies, and that French infantry battalion has moved up in support. Otherwise in the centre, no movement for the French here. So we move across. We've deployed some of the chasseurs forward. Not really sure, but there may be an opportunity to come through this village and put some pressure on the Allied flank. So we're going to keep some pressure up on this flank. This is the best opportunity for a French counterattack. And we've been a bit sneaky because the Portuguese went hesitant. And in responding to being hesitant, they weren't able to move forward. They weren't able to charge. So they have deployed all their battalions in line, which means they can do some volleys against the village. But the French took the opportunity of the Portuguese being hesitant to rotate their battalions that are occupying that village. So the damaged battalion that had taken 6 casualties did an unformed retire, which you're allowed to do if you're an unformed unit, and they took an extra casualty and pulled themselves back out the village, and they were replaced. So the garrison is still unformed, but has no casualties at the moment. So a stronger French position there. All right, so first we will do firing, and it's firing for the Allies to start this turn 6. Okay, so firing's been undertaken. A couple of casualties caused against the assaulting British battalion here, otherwise just an exchange of skirmisher fires along here. This British battalion with the yellow flag that took all that artillery fire has now taken 11 casualties, and despite being veterans is in a pretty dire state, so that one needs to pull back desperately, or we're going to get a full test as that battalion may be wiped out. Should have really pulled it back this turn, so that's a mistake by the British. Over here, a couple more casualties caused. We've both lost a base in our skirmisher screen as we exchanged a fire over here, and the French garrison wasn't able to cause any casualties on the Portuguese, but took one in return from those Portuguese volleys. So that's it for movement and firing in turn 6. We've now got the assault. Can the Allies wrest control of this village off the French this turn? Okay, so the British are going to need some good dice rolling here. The French are on 6 dice. 5 for their normal battalion. It is formed up, so it will get all 5, and it gets an extra 1 for its attached battalion gun. So it gets 6 dice in combat, and the Allies lose 1, and they're not attacking with any of their veteran battalions here. So let's see how we do. All right, oh, well, that's pretty good for the Allies. So the Allies cause 2 casualties, and the French only cause 1. So the French will fight on. They don't want to lose control of this village. But the Allies do get the opportunity to throw their extra battalions in now. Okay, so we both reckon that we can get 2 more battalions in to support the attacks. So both sides will actually get 15 dice. So I'll roll the first 10, and then I'll get 5 more for the French. That's a pretty good roll for the French. How many have we got so far? 4, 5, 6, 7 hits. And then I've got 5 more dice. That's 4 more dice. And then 1 more. That's it. Okay, so the French have done pretty well. That's 9 casualties caused. And then for the Allies, we get also 15 dice. And then we get 5 more. Not so good by the look of it. No, so the Allies are going to get firmly beaten here. So the Allies and the British battalions get thrown back from that assault on the village. They take 5 casualties, or cause 5 casualties. The French cause 9. Let's go and mark those up on the units, and the British will have to fall back. Okay, so all Allied brigades are active. 2 French have gone hesitant, the French cavalry and the French holding this village, obviously feeling exposed and have gone hesitant. So we'll have to roll for initiative, but firstly, and most importantly, we'll roll our full test for this British brigade that got thrown back from that combat, has 3 retreating units, therefore needs to do a full test. So let's just have a check on that. So faltering brigades with a 3 is a retire result, which would take them off the table. So we are going to go for a reroll. We roll a 6. That's excellent news for the British. They nearly lost that brigade, but fortunately for them they don't, and they obey orders. All right, charges and movement. So this veteran British brigade has also decided to follow up the assault into this village, as the French defenders are now unformed, having thrown back the Allied assault from this brigade. So they've got an opportunity there to try and get them while on the hop, as it were. Otherwise, not much movement on the British lines. They're continuing to put pressure on this village in the centre, but the French have formed up now in the village on the right. Portuguese will continue to fire on them. That's it. Otherwise, for the French, they've moved their cavalry into column, so they can potentially charge through the village in due course, but were hesitant, so couldn't do anything else. All right, that's it. Let's do the firing, starting with the Allies. All right, conducting the assault here, the French are only on 3 dice because they've taken 2 casualties and they are unformed, but they do get the support of their gun. The Allies, unfortunately, now have taken a casualty, so they'll be down to 4 dice. They would normally be on 5. 4 for the casualty, but 5, I think, because they're a morale grade higher. We will just check that they get that morale grade adjustment. The Allies cause 3 casualties, the French cause 2. That means we can go on to a second round of combat. Okay, so the French have the option as to whether to continue the combat into the second round the French were actually wiped out by that level of casualties. So I'm not sure that they have the option of fighting on. So I'm not 100% clear about this. If anyone knows, do let me know in the comments. But I think the British have captured the village. They've wiped out the French defending garrison, and the French supports can't come in because there's nothing left to support. I think that's probably the way to do it. It would seem fairer on the Allies, as they have wiped the French out to a man. All right, and that will be a destiny test on that French brigade as well next turn. So the Allies have occupied this village on the right. Okay, so we've now got to roll for ADCs for turn 8. The French needed a few. Yeah, they've only got 2, which they'll have to allocate to this brigade that's suffering a savoir-faire. The Allies have 3. So we'll see where to deploy those, and I'll come back and do the test for the faltering Allied brigade. Okay, for the French, they're active on their far left flank. Unfortunately, their cavalry and their brigade in the centre have gone hesitant. They've had to allocate all their ADCs to this brigade here. All the Allied brigades have gone active. So we will now do the test. I just need to find the right chart for the faltering brigade. Okay, here we go. Let's roll their falter test for the French brigade. We roll a 4. That's pretty good. I think we'll leave it at that. On a line brigade, that means they rally. So retreating and routed units disperse, of which there weren't any because we were wiped out. Anyway, they do go hesitant, so the French will now be on -3 this turn. They must step back, but that is it. Okay, so those French units will have to step back, which is, I think, only 3 inches for infantry, but they are hesitant. So let's roll for initiative. The French are at -3 on this turn. -3 on 8 gets them down to 5. The Allies rolled a 5, but the Allies had initiative last turn, so they keep it for turn 8, I think we're on. Okay, so turn 8 comes to a close. The British firmly in the possession of this village, although the battalion in there is quite heavily damaged, so they'll want to exchange that for another brigade or another battalion shortly. In the centre, the Allies still trying to put concentrated volley fire into the village to try and weaken the French before they assault, but volleying is proving really not very effective. They have managed to get infantry assault orders off on the KGL brigade though, so that might help them in the future. And they're trying to do something similar here with the Portuguese, trying to whittle the garrison down here, but again, that's proving very slow and tough work. So still looking reasonably good for the French, but these assaults over these remaining villages in the coming turns will really make the difference. All right, let's roll for ADCs as we move into turn 9. Okay, so 4 for the French and 3 for the Allies. Let's see how we deployed those and roll for activation. Okay, so for the Allies, they have managed to get infantry assault off on their Portuguese brigade. So now the Portuguese and the KGL have both got infantry assault, so they can start trying to recapture these 2 villages. But the KGL, unfortunately, are hesitant. For the French, all their brigades went hesitant, unfortunately, other than this brigade on the far right flank, which also went for infantry assault, hence the shortage of ADCs, providing them with any rerolls. Okay, so let's roll for initiative. The French are at -2 with 3 hesitant brigades, and the Allies at -1. So the Allies go down to 3, the French goes down to 5, so the French do have the initiative. Let's see if they're going to try and recapture this village and charge in. Okay, so the French have charged here on their right, and as we go across the line, the Portuguese have charged on their flank. So we'll do the defensive fire to start with from the garrisons. So it'll be 3 shots from this French garrison. They don't do any casualties on the Portuguese, so that attack will go in unhindered. And then we'll move across here. We've got a defensive volley by the British. They've taken 7 casualties, so they'll lose 1 dice for this. So they're only 2 defensive dice. They do cause 1 casualty on the attacking French battalion. All right, battalions automatically go into built-up areas, so there's no charge result, and we'll get into the built-up area combat as we get to the end of the turn. All right, well, let's move on to the rest of movement and fire. Okay, so the British have deployed, or did deploy last turn, this horse artillery battery onto the table as part of their reserves, and that is opening up at effective range against this village here. It's deployed out of line of sight of the heavy French batteries on the hill to give it a bit of protection. It will fire this turn. This will, remember, be at half effect and -1. But that's pretty good. We've rolled a double 12. That might have some reasonable impact against the village. So a battery at effective range is 4 casualties in a discipline test. That takes it down to 3 casualties in a discipline test, which we halve, which is just, unfortunately, you round that down to 1. So that's 1 more casualty against the garrison, but it does take them up to 4. And being conscripts, that takes them down to recruit status. So let's do the discipline test at -1. They roll a 7, so they go unformed, which won't help their status for a potential attack next turn. And then let's do the falter test. We roll an 11 on the falter test. So that will be painful, I think. 11 is a risk, an unsightly demise. So the brigade holding this village in the centre, the first time it's under artillery fire, has got to take a falter test at the start of next turn. All right, this could be potentially decisive for the British, as another village is at risk. But let's see how these combats go. These are also vital to the success of these assaults. Okay, down here the Portuguese get 4 dice, the French get 5, as both are pretty undamaged battalions. Let's see how we do. French looking pretty good. They've caused 3 casualties against the Portuguese 2. So the French get to choose whether they want to fight on. So the French are going to fight on. The French are going to fight on. So will the Portuguese. The French get 2 supporting battalions, as do the Portuguese. We'll work out these dice and get on to this next round of this combat for the village. Unfortunately for the French, one of their supporting battalions is one of the ones that was previously thrown out of this village. So they will get 4 dice for the battalion defending the village, 5 for one of the supports, but only 3 for the other of the supports. So let's see how they do. Let's roll the French casualties from this attack. Okay, not too bad. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 casualties, but could be better. For the Portuguese, we get 4 dice for the first 2 attacking battalions and 5 for the second. So I need to roll 5 re-rolls. Okay, they can still be close, but it's looking in favour of the French. Yeah, the French win by 1. The Portuguese are thrown back with 4 casualties, and the French caused 5. Okay, things over here looking better for the British. They should get 5 dice. The French only get 3 for attacking in the first round. Let's see if they can hang on to this village. Yes, they can. The French cause 1 casualty. The Allies cause 3. The French are thrown back. Okay, so at the end of turn 9, the British remain in control of this village, and the French have been thrown back. But as the French didn't decide to commit, or in fact they couldn't because they got defeated, couldn't commit any more battalions, they have fallen back behind their unit, remain formed, and that's just 1 retreating unit, so no falter test on the French, so still a threat on that flank. In the centre, the Allies are not in a great position. They took some artillery casualties. That conscript brigade holding the village has taken over 4 casualties now, so it will now count as recruits. So the Allies will want to charge that next turn if they can hopefully get initiative. And over here, the French continue to hold this village. They'll probably want to rotate to the defending battalion, because again, that's now taken quite heavy casualties. That's at 7, but the Portuguese are a mess down here, having fled from that combat, and the Portuguese will have to take a falter test. So let's roll for ADCs, a pretty important role for the French, and more importantly for the Allies, as we look to rotate troops, keep up the momentum of attack, and hopefully not have our Portuguese brigade disintegrate. So, the French have 2 ADCs, Allies have 3. They will allocate 2 to their Portuguese brigade, and then we'll allocate our 3rd one to the KGL, and hopefully we can get the assault going in there, and we'll rely on luck in getting this unit activated. For the French, they will take their 2 ADCs, they'll allocate 1 to this village over here to try and do the troop rotation, and 1 to 2 here to try and do the troop rotation. So let's roll for activation. Back in a second. Okay, clearly there's a bit of a pause in the battle going on, so the French have been successful and they activated that brigade on the left, and they will do the rotation of troops over there. Unfortunately in the centre, their brigade has gone hesitant here, so they were unable, or will be, I suppose yes, they won't be able to bring a new unit in because that will count as advancing. The KGL have gone active, so they can conduct their assault this turn, but unfortunately for the Allies, these other two brigades on the left have gone hesitant, as has the French one opposing them. Alright, now let's do our reroll and our falter test on our Portuguese. A 3 will take them off the table, so we have to reroll. We've got a 6. Again, both sides have been lucky with their rerolls. The Portuguese get to reform. Okay, so the Portuguese have reformed on this table edge, and their other battalion remains in the line near that village on the far right flank. The KGL have now launched their assault in the centre, so we'll see how that goes against the unformed French troops in the village there, and the British continue to hold the village here. Alright, so let's crack on with shooting in turn 11, I think. Okay, I decided not to record the long-range artillery fire from the French guns because they're pretty much out of the game, as most of these attacking KGL battalions are too close to the river to be fired at, or concealed again by the hedge line and the buildings here. However, I thought we'd do some speculative fire against this Portuguese brigade, which I think they can see at long range, and I've managed to roll a 12 and a 10 against firing against the rearmost battalion. So that'll teach me for not filming all of the stuff. So a 12 does 3 casualties and a 10 does 2, so that's 5 more casualties on this battalion and a discipline test. So that'll be a discipline test at -1. 7, so they go unformed, so not the end of the world, but they do take 5 more casualties. So that'll teach me for not doing that filming. The British horse artillery did wheel round and do lose their volley against the building, but needless to say, with the penalties of firing against built-up areas, didn't do any damage against the French. We continue to see these skirmishers fighting in this cornfield. Both sides now likely to lose their skirmish screen, so they probably want to pull those back next turn so they don't have to take a break test as a result of the loss of a skirmish screen. That's it for the rest of the firing, and we'll get on with the KGL's assault against this village in the centre. Okay, so the French still have a reasonable chance. They get 5 dice. 5 normally, they lose 1 for the number of casualties they've taken. They lose 1 for being unformed, but they gain 1 for the battalion gun. So actually 4 dice for them. The Allies get 5 dice, knocked down to 4 because they're attacking a built-up area, but +2 for being 2 morale levels higher. So this is 6 dice to 4. How will the Allies do? Pretty terrible. They lose by 1. So the defenders get the option of fighting another round. They will hang on because it's one of their victory conditions. The KGL will also have another go. It's all or nothing. Let's see if we can get into this village. Okay, so the assaulting Allies get 20 assault dice. They're all veterans. Only one of them has taken 1 casualty, so they would get 5 dice normally, +2 for being 2 grades higher than the Allies. Well, not all of the Allies. Against the Ally battalion that's occupying the village. I'm not quite sure how we do that. Anyway, we'll do that. We'll count it as 7, so that gives us to 21. And then we lose 1 because one of the units has taken 4 casualties. So let's see how we do. So we roll this twice. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from the first roll. And then for the second roll, wow, much better. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's 10, 11, 12. So 12 casualties caused by the Allies. Let's see how the French brigade defending the village does. So the 1st battalion gets 5 dice, 6 dice because of its battalion gun, loses 1 for being unformed and 1 for built-up area, so it gets 4. And the next supporting battalion gets 5, and the final supporting battalion will also get 5. So 5 more dice after this. We roll 2, and then another 5. See how we do. That's only 4 casualties. So the Allies might have got a couple too many, but they've still resoundingly won this combat and captured these villages, and they cause 12 casualties on the Allies and 12 casualties on the French and 4 on the KGL. Okay, so pretty dramatic results for the Allies here. So with that great combat result, the KGL have taken the village. There's also a rule in the scenario that allows you to advance a second supporting unit that took part in the combat through the village and out onto the plain beyond. So we've moved this KGL line battalion forward. Both of them have to go unformed, but given that all of the French battalions have been thrown out and are retreating, they feel fairly safe in that position. Good result, really good result for the Allies as we complete the end of turn 11. And we'll have some Fulter tests to do for the French as we approach turn 12. Okay, so a pretty terrible roll for ADCs. The French and the Allies only have one each, which means we have only one to allocate to our retiring brigade. So that could be the end of that French brigade, which will create an enormous hole in the centre. Let's roll that first, because that, I think, will pretty much cause this to become an Allied victory, as I can't see any way the French are going to be able to recapture that village without that central brigade. And they've got a tough ask here on this flank, although it's still doable, as we only have one battalion in the village, and that is quite weak for the Allies. But we do have a second brigade in reserve there. So let's roll this first. We'll roll that one ADC for the French, see what result we get. We get a 5. They are, and that might be all right, they are counting now as a recruit brigade, and so on a 5 or a 6, they do obey orders. A remarkable result for the French, and the battle will carry on. Okay, so for the first time for a long time, the French have initiative, so they may have an opportunity for trying to get into the village, but they don't have infantry assault off, so that would only be one battalion counterattacking. It might be worth it, as the Allies are not in a great state. Otherwise, all French units have obey orders, and this supporting Allied brigade here is hesitant, but otherwise all Allied ones are okay as well. Right, let's move on. French to declare charges and move in turn 12. Okay, so the French have countercharged into this village as a final attempt to recapture this objective. The British have moved up a second battalion in support, moving up to the river hedge line. This brigade, unfortunately, was hesitant. In the centre, the British are reinforcing their lines in the centre. They've reformed their KGL, who are over the river, and the KGL lights are moving up in support. And these KGL lights and the skirmish screen are going to put pressure on the French. They're redeploying the rest of their brigade to try and counterattack and capture the centre here, and the French artillery will be able to add some impact here. And then on the far right, the French are bringing their cavalry now up to the village, as there is some space here potentially for them to do a countercharge through the village, perhaps if they get a forwards order off next turn, and to threaten this Allied right flank. Right, so let's move on with firing in turn 12. Okay, so the French skirmishers continue to chip away. The French artillery battery will now open fire. It's going to open fire at long range. I think it still can only target this poor Portuguese battalion down here, so we'll fire that one first. Wow, another great result. That 5 there, and that 6 is another 11. So this is 2 turns in a row that it's been hit by 11s and 12s. So that's 2 more casualties and another destiny test. So this destiny test, discipline test, will now be at -2. Double 1. They're gone. That Portuguese battalion is destroyed. It retreats off the table, and it is actually just a retreat result, so it won't cause a Fulter test on the Portuguese brigade. But good shooting from that French artillery battery. I'll mark that up in a second. And then the second the second artillery battery, the right-hand one as you see it here, this one here, is going to open fire at the KGLs here. I think they're just within arc of fire. I'm not sure that they are, to be honest. It's a 45-degree fire arc. I think they're out of the arc of fire. So they will also fire at that Portuguese battalion before it disappears. That's an 8 at long range. Is another 1 more casualty. All right, so that was 3 more casualties against that Portuguese brigade. So again, not quite a wipeout, and it won't cause a Fulter test. That's the end of the French firing for the turn. All right, now the hand-to-hand combat in the village. This will be a straight roll-off as the Allies get the advantage of the built-up area and being veterans, but they have sustained 8 casualties. Let's see how they do. Terribly, they cause no casualties. The French win the combat. They've thrown the Allies out of the village. Okay, so all the ADCs have gone active, and the Allies did get infantry assault off on their British brigade here, so they can have another go at recapturing that town. Otherwise, we'll have to see how the turn plays out. Everyone's got the same number of dice. The French did place a forwards order, indeed, on their cavalry, so that's got a bonus move of 14 inches. Okay, let's see how the initiative goes. This is rolling for the British, a 7. And we'll now roll for the French, a 4. So the British have initiative. British charges first. Okay, so the Allies have charged in with 2 battalions here. They've kept 1 battalion back as support so they can fall back behind it and not retreat the whole brigade, so they're learning the lessons on deployment there. This British battalion's remained exchanging fire with the skirmishers. As we move across, this very weak British battalion still just holding position in the centre, supported by the KGL lights, who will be able to volley into the flank of this French unit. And all these French battalions of this whole brigade are now moving up to threaten and potentially counterattack back into the village and against the British units that are exiting on the flank. And then as we move across to the right, we can see that forwards orders has indeed brought my French chasseurs out into the plain. Not quite enough to be able to charge this turn, but certainly a charge coming in next turn. But they'll take some fire from the Allies here first. All right, let's move on with firing. Okay, we've done some firing over here, no major effect, but this British battalion took fire from both the French artillery batteries. Unfortunately, it was exposed and it's taken up to 11 casualties, so we've nearly got a destroyed battalion there. With not much we can do about that. That will probably be wiped out next turn by the French. We've also got very heavy casualties on this battalion here, so that British brigade's not in great space. But its remaining battalion here will exchange fire with those French skirmishers, so let's do that. That's a 9. That is an inferior volley with cover, which is 2 casualties against those French skirmishers. It does take off another base, but that skirmish screen remains intact. Right down here, the British skirmishers moved across the river. They did lose a base as a result, but they will open fire against the French guns on the hill for the first time in this battle, and they cause 1 casualty against the French guns. Actually, they might fire against this French right-hand battalion here. They'll do that. They take them up to 7 casualties. All right, we will then fire a inferior volley against the flank of that same French battalion. We get a 9. Inferior volley is 2 casualties and a discipline test, but you -1 for firing through the screen of the vegetation, so it takes them up to just 2 casualties and no discipline test. That takes them up to an 8. All right, we'll now fire. We have the opportunity to do a superior volley at -1 with this KGL battalion. It'll fire at the French battalion in the centre. That battalion there, that looks like the most obvious target. Let's do a superior volley. Pretty good. We roll an 11. Superior volley is 5 casualties and a discipline test on that attacking French battalion. Okay, so let's do the discipline test. This will be on -2 as that unit's taken 9 casualties. They roll a double 1. That's a retreat. That battalion will disappear off table. And that double 6 next to the brigade commander is to remind me that they've got to take a falter test this time because the French skirmisher screen has finally been wiped out that was in place on the other side of the village. So falter test already on that brigade, and we lose another French battalion to that volley from the KGL. And then the KGL garrison will fire against the right-hand side column over there. And we cause 1 more casualty against them. Okay, we'll go and move those units. Now some very important firing. The KGL, or the British Royal Horse Artillery, will open fire at close range against these upcoming chasseurs, rather. See how they do. They roll a 5. That's not great. So 5 for a close range artillery fire is 1 casualty against the French. And we'll also have a shot from this column, which will be at half effect. They roll a 4, so that'll be no effect. So that is going to be a real problem for those troops this turn, as that cavalry is definitely within charge range and has only taken 1 casualty. Okay, this is a straight roll off. The French will want to do well because the Allies have 2 supports to throw in. The French have none. They only have that 1 battalion garrison in this site. Would be 5 for the French, but they are unformed, having moved in this turn. See how we do. Wow, pretty good for the French. Looks like they might hang on here. That's 3 casualties caused on the British. They will have to retreat, and they retain control of the village. Okay, so over here both sides are active, but the British have got lots of unformed units, so we'll have only a relatively weak unit there, 2 weak units there to potentially charge into the village. So still looking like the village is a hard objective to take this turn. As we move across here, all units are active. We'll see how the French attacks have to take place, but we have to do their Falter test. And over here, we're active here, and we did put artillery assault on the British artillery to try and protect it from this upcoming French charge. Okay, let's do the Falter test for the French brigade threatening the centre. They roll a 3. That's not great. I think that's a retire result, so we will go with our reroll. We roll a 4. This is for a recruit brigade, so a 4 is a rally. So the brigade remains hesitant, and they have to step back if they're close to formed KGL units. So that's we'll do that manoeuvre and then get on with the rest of this turn. Okay, and importantly we need to roll for initiative as well. The French have initiative this turn, so they will be able to get this charge in. Let's do that step move and then we'll do charges. Okay, so the French have brought their 2 battalions back up in support of the village, so this looks a tough ask as these British battalions here have taken a lot of casualties. Might have 1 more assault in them, might be lucky, but looks pretty remote here. Here the British have deployed further out of the village with a view to getting superior volleys off against the French in due course, and they will only be able to fire inferior volleys as they've moved forward, but the French stepped back this turn, so can't do any counter manoeuvres. And against the British flank there is a significant threat here as this French cavalry charges in. We'll have to see how the defensive fire goes and how this charge result plays out. Let's move on and do that now. So we'll fire a short range canister from the Royal Horse Artillery as these French chasseurs charge up. Well, that couldn't have been much worse. That's no effect from the canister fire. Clearly caught on the hop, and then the volley from the column, which is the actual target of the charge, again I think will do nothing as the result has to be halved if you're firing in column. Okay, let's do the charge result. It's a +1 modifier for the Allies for being in column, but that's it. The French get a 5, the Allies get a 6, that's a -1 charge result for the charge. So cavalry versus infantry, the cavalry to fire retire with 1 casualty, so no major impact there, and the charge by the chasseurs has been thrown back. So no major impact on the firing till we get to the flanks here. So we fired the skirmishers, which caused an extra casualty in one of these French battalions that's traversing the lines. We'll now fire the KGL light. So they are a 7. This is again an inferior volley because we're firing through the woods. An 8 gets reduced to a 7, so that's 1 more casualty against the French. That takes them up to 11. All right, and then the KGL will also fire. This will be an inferior volley as well because they moved. A 5. Unfortunately for the Allies, that doesn't do anything, and an inferior volley from the other KGL light battalion against the right-hand side of the French. That's 1 casualty, but nothing because they're hiding behind a hedge, and then the garrison will fire. And they don't do anything either. So no effect from the firing this turn. So at the end of turn 14, we still have a standoff in the village here, potentially 1 more attack by the Allies to go in to try and wrest control of that. In the centre, it's looking dicey for the French. They haven't got enough forces, I don't think, to drive off the British now, especially as they can do superior volleys to counterfire. Here, this is definitely going to be held by the French at the end of the game. So right, let's move on to turn 15, roll for ADCs, and I think we'll probably just play out the key attacks here and see where the Allies can get anywhere. Okay, turn 15, the Allies have initiative. It's all or nothing. They've thrown their whole of this brigade back into the assault into this village, see if they can wrest it from French control. This brigade is too weak to do any assaulting. They will retain their strong position in the centre and just do some firing against the village over here. So let's see how we do. From the French, we've got some defensive fire first, and then we'll do firing and then come back to you with the hand-to-hand combat. Okay, so the Allies have nearly broken the French attack in the centre. This nearest battalion here is on 11 casualties, and the one on the right-hand side over there is also on 11 casualties, so a bit more firing next turn. And we'll have one, if not two, wiped out French battalions probably. But still we have the crunch here. If they can hold this village, the French will win this game. Let's see how this British attack goes. This is it. Unfortunately, due to the garrison defensive fire, the British are now on 4 casualties here, so they only attack with 3 dice. The French do defend with 5. They really need to get into the second round. Let's see how we do. Oh, well, that's remarkable for the British. The British cause 3 casualties, as do the French. The British will opt for a second round of combat. It could have been all over. Let's see how this second round goes. Okay, this is a really close combat, so the Allies get 4 dice for each of their attacking battalions. They've all taken 6 or 7 casualties. So I'll roll 10 here, and I'll get 2 more rerolls. Take 2 of the misses. Not great for the Allies, so that's 1, 2, 3 casualties for the Allies. Pretty dire result. Okay, so for the French, we get 4 dice for each of the battalions, and this battalion here actually gets a 5th dice because it's taken no casualties, so I get 1 reroll on these dice, see how they do. And let's do a reroll. Okay, so we have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the French win by 3. They force a Fulter test on this brigade and force its units to fall back, retreating. So this is the way the game ends. So the British have been thrown back after 3 assaults on this village. The French did remarkably well here. They had potentially 2 brigades, or did have 2 brigades thrown into the assault against this village, 1 veteran brigade and 1 line brigade. And I think the scenario rules making it necessary to do inferior volleys across the stream and into the villages really did help the Allies here. And this brigade would have had a Fulter test, as it had 3 retreating units, and I rolled the Fulter tests and it was a further fallback. So they would have disappeared off the table in turn 16, no chance to fight their way back in. There is 1 French battalion up here, but it's on a heavy number of casualties, and I think given that there are 3 French battalions still holding the village, unlikely it could do very much. Over on this flank, the British firmly hold this village. They're all KGL battalions, they've got very few casualties, they're all veterans, and they can do superior volleys, and this brigade of French recruits, now it's been kicked out of the village, is really unable to retake it, even with that artillery support. But over here on the right flank, the French, again, clearly hold this village. They've pretty much destroyed the offensive firepower of this Portuguese brigade. There's plenty of supports there for the French, and those units really haven't taken too many casualties at all in the game, and they have their cavalry support, which they can again deploy onto the field and try and outflank the Allies. So I think we have to say, great result for the French. Clearly Charlie not being here has again swung the tide in favour of the French forces this time, and we'll see what happens as we progress on to the next scenario. Hope you've enjoyed this one, and I'll see you all again next time. Remember to subscribe, give us any feedback, let me know your comments. Hope you're enjoying it, and see you soon. Cheers.